The rain had already soaked the sidewalks before sunrise, but Amara Brooks was still outside, pushing a rusted cleaning cart toward the old community center where she worked. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her shoes were cracked, her jacket was too thin for the cold morning air, and her stomach had been empty since yesterday afternoon. People walked past her without a second glance. Some stared. Some whispered. Others laughed. To most of the neighborhood, Amara wasn't a young woman with dreams. She was simply that worthless girl who never seemed to catch a break. She lowered her eyes and kept walking. Her adoptive father, Nathan Brooks, had reminded her before she left home. "Don't come back unless you've earned every dollar for this house. You're lucky we even let you stay." The words echoed in her mind like a song she never wanted to hear again. When she reached the community center, the manager handed her a bucket and pointed toward the entrance. "There's mud everywhere. Make sure this place shines before 8. Amara smiled politely. "Yes, sir." She always smiled. Not because she was happy. Because she had learned long ago that tears only made cruel people crueler. Across the city, black SUVs quietly entered the underground garage of the White House. President Elijah Carter stood in front of a large window overlooking Washington, D.C. Despite leading one of the most powerful nations in the world, his eyes carried a sadness no election victory had ever erased. On his desk rested an old silver locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of a baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket. He gently touched the faded picture. "I promised I'd find you," he whispered. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Secret Service Director Daniel Hayes entered. "Mr. President, we've received another lead." Elijah slowly looked up. "Is it credible?" Daniel hesitated. "It may be the strongest one we've had in 24 years, for the first time in years." Hope returned to the president's face. Meanwhile, Amara scrubbed the marble floor until it reflected the ceiling lights. Children began arriving with their parents. One little girl accidentally dropped her backpack. Books scattered everywhere. Before anyone else reacted, Amara hurried over. "It's okay." She knelt, picked up every notebook, dusted them off, and handed them back with a warm smile. The little girl hugged her. "Thank you." Her mother pulled the child away. "Don't bother the janitor." Amara smiled anyway. "It's all right." As they walked away, the little girl looked back and waved. Amara waved back. That tiny moment of kindness became the brightest part of her day. Later that afternoon, Amara stopped at a grocery store with the few dollars she had earned. She carefully counted every coin before choosing bread, milk, and a can of soup. While waiting in line, she noticed an elderly African-American man struggling to pay for his medicine. He searched every pocket. Still not enough. People behind him sighed impatiently. One man rolled his eyes. "If you can't afford it, move aside." The old man's hands trembled. Amara quietly stepped forward. "I'll pay." The cashier looked surprised. "But that's all your money." Amara nodded. "He needs it more than I do." The elderly man stared at her with watery eyes. "My child, why would you do this?" She smiled. "My grandmother used to say kindness always comes home." He squeezed her hand. "You have a beautiful heart." She simply smiled and walked away carrying only the loaf of bread she could still afford. She didn't know someone had witnessed everything. Across the street, a black SUV remained parked. Inside, Director Daniel Hayes watched silently. He spoke into his radio. "Subject displays extraordinary compassion despite severe hardship." Another voice replied. "Continue surveillance." Daniel never took his eyes off Amara. Something about her felt strangely familiar. That evening, Amara returned to the small house she had lived in since childhood. Nathan sat in his favorite chair watching television. Vanessa lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone. Grace quietly prepared dinner in the kitchen. Nathan looked at the nearly empty grocery bag. "That's all?" Amara spoke softly. "I helped someone who needed medicine." Nathan exploded. "You gave away our money?" Vanessa laughed. "She's always trying to act like some kind of saint." Nathan grabbed the loaf of bread and threw it onto the floor. "You are the biggest mistake this family ever made." Silence filled the room. Grace wanted to speak, but fear kept her quiet. Amara bent down, picked up the bread, brushed away the dust, and whispered, "I'm sorry." Nathan pointed toward the basement. "No dinner for you tonight." Without another word, Amara walked downstairs. She sat alone on an old mattress beneath a tiny window. Moonlight slipped through the cracked glass. From an old wooden box, she removed the only treasure she had ever owned. A worn baby blanket embroidered with a tiny golden crown in one corner. Grace had once admitted it wasn't bought from a store. It had been wrapped around Amara when she was found as a baby outside a church during a storm. There had been no note, no name, only the blanket. As Amara gently held it close, she whispered, "I don't know who you were, but I hope you loved me." A single tear rolled down her cheek. At that very moment, inside the White House residence, President Elijah Carter opened a secure envelope delivered by Director Hayes. Inside were several recent photographs. The first showed Amara helping the little girl. The second captured her buying medicine for the elderly man. The third showed her smiling even after being humiliated. Elijah's hands began to tremble. Then his eyes widened. He noticed the corner of the old blanket visible beneath Amara's arm in one photograph. A tiny golden crown. The exact symbol that had been embroidered on the blanket of the daughter he had lost decades ago. His breathing grew heavy. Impossible. Director Hayes spoke carefully. "Mr. President, should we proceed with DNA confirmation?" Elijah never looked away from the photograph. Tears slowly filled his eyes. "Find her. No matter what it takes." Amara barely slept that night. The cold basement floor pressed against her back, but it wasn't the cold that kept her awake. It was the same question that had followed her since childhood. Who am I? She held the faded baby blanket tightly against her chest until the first rays of sunlight slipped through the cracked basement window. Upstairs, Nathan's voice shattered the silence. "Amara, if you're still sleeping, don't bother coming upstairs." She quickly folded the blanket, placed it carefully back into the wooden box, and climbed the old stairs. Nathan tossed a long list of chores onto the table. "Finish these before noon, then go to work. And don't expect gratitude. You're only useful when you're working." Amara nodded quietly. "Yes, sir." Vanessa smirked. "I still don't understand why Mom brought you home all those years ago. Nobody wanted you then, and nobody wants you now." The words struck like arrows. Grace lowered her head, unable to defend the daughter she secretly loved. Amara simply whispered, "Have a good morning." She walked out before anyone could see the tears forming in her eyes. Across Washington, President Elijah Carter sat in the Situation Room, not to discuss national security, but to hear the latest report on one young woman. Director Daniel Hayes projected several photographs onto a large screen. "This is Amara Brooks." Images appeared one after another. Amara helping children. Amara giving food to a homeless veteran. Amara comforting a frightened stray dog during a thunderstorm. Amara smiling despite being insulted. The room fell silent. One advisor finally spoke. "Mr. President, she doesn't seem interested in money or attention." Elijah smiled sadly. "She has her mother's heart." No one else understood what those words truly meant. Daniel continued. "We've obtained permission to collect a DNA sample without alarming her. Results should arrive within 48 hours. The president closed his eyes. "For 24 years I prayed for one answer." His voice trembled. "I can wait 2 more days." That afternoon, Amara's shift ended later than usual. Instead of going straight home, she stopped at a small neighborhood park. It was the only place where she felt invisible. She sat on an old wooden bench watching children play beneath tall oak trees. Nearby, a young boy accidentally kicked his soccer ball into the busy street. Without thinking, he ran after it. A speeding delivery truck rounded the corner. People screamed. "Stop." Everything happened in seconds. Amara sprang from the bench. She sprinted into the street, grabbed the terrified child, and threw both of them toward the sidewalk. The truck's brake screamed as it stopped only inches away. Silence. Then applause. The boy clung tightly to Amara. "You saved me." His mother rushed over, crying uncontrollably. She hugged both of them. "Thank you, thank you." A crowd quickly gathered. Someone recorded the entire rescue on a phone. Amara felt embarrassed by the attention. "I'm just glad he's safe." She quietly slipped away before reporters arrived. She never realized the video had already begun spreading across social media. Several miles away, investigative journalist Marcus Reed was reviewing trending videos when one clip caught his attention. He watched it once. Then again. There was something unforgettable about the young woman's calm courage. He zoomed in on her face. A notification suddenly appeared on his computer. Facial recognition match requested by federal authorities. Marcus frowned. Federal authorities? Why would the government be interested in an unknown janitor? Curiosity took over. This story is bigger than anyone realizes. That evening, Grace quietly entered the basement carrying a bowl of hot soup. Amara looked surprised. "You'll get in trouble." Grace smiled softly. "Let him be angry." She sat beside Amara for the first time in years. After several moments of silence, Grace finally spoke. I've carried a secret long enough. Amara looked up. What secret? Grace's hands trembled. The day we found you, you weren't abandoned the way everyone believes. Amara's heart pounded. What do you mean? Grace swallowed hard. You were wrapped in that beautiful blanket. She glanced toward the wooden box. But there was something else. Amara whispered. What? Grace closed her eyes. A man left you. The room became perfectly still. He wore a dark suit. He arrived in a black car. He kissed your forehead before placing you on the church steps. Amara's breathing became uneven. You saw him? Grace nodded slowly. Only for a moment. Before I reached the door, he disappeared. Why didn't you tell me? Nathan suddenly shouted from upstairs. Grace! Where are you? She stood immediately. I can't talk now. Before leaving, she gently touched Amara's cheek. One day, you'll know the truth. Then she hurried upstairs. Amara remained frozen. Everything she believed about her past had just changed. Late that night, Director Daniel Hayes personally visited the church where Amara had been found as a baby. The elderly pastor unlocked an old storage room filled with dusty records. I haven't opened these boxes in decades. Hayes searched carefully. Birth records. Donation logs. Baptism books. Nothing. Then, a faded envelope slipped from between two old journals. Across the front were 4 handwritten words. For my daughter. Hayes slowly opened it. Inside rested an old photograph. The picture showed a smiling young Elijah Carter, years before becoming president, holding a newborn baby wrapped in the same blanket embroidered with a golden crown. Hayes stared in disbelief. This can't be. His phone vibrated. A secure message flashed across the screen. DNA results ready. His heartbeat quickened. With trembling fingers, he opened the encrypted file. His eyes widened. He read the first line once. Then twice. Finally, he whispered to himself, My God. He immediately called the White House. The president answered after the first ring. Daniel struggled to speak. Mr. President. The silence lasted only a heartbeat. Then he said the words that would change 2 lives forever. We found her. The words echoed through the silent Oval Office. We found her. President Elijah Carter stood motionless, gripping the edge of his desk as tears slowly rolled down his face. For 24 years, he had imagined this moment thousands of times. Yet now that it had finally arrived, he could barely breathe. He looked again at the faded photograph of the baby wrapped in the blanket with the tiny golden crown. My little girl. His voice broke. I never stopped looking for you. Director Daniel Hayes spoke gently through the phone. The DNA match is over 99.99%, Mr. President. Elijah closed his eyes. Prepare a full security detail. After a long pause, he added. But don't tell her who she is. Not yet. I want to meet her, as a father, not as a president. The next morning, Amara left home before sunrise as usual. Nathan didn't even look at her. Vanessa laughed from the porch. Maybe today someone will finally pay you for being worthless. Amara kept walking. She refused to let hatred become part of her heart. On the bus, she noticed a frightened little boy sitting alone, crying quietly. His mother was nowhere to be seen. Passengers ignored him. Amara knelt beside him. Hey, sweetheart. What's your name? The little boy wiped his tears. Caleb. Are you lost? He nodded. Amara stayed with him until transit security located his panicked mother at the next station. The grateful woman hugged Amara with tears in her eyes. You've helped my family more than you'll ever know. Amara smiled softly. I'm just glad he's safe. Once again, someone recorded the moment. Within hours, another video of the mysterious kind-hearted janitor spread across the internet. People began calling her the Angel of Washington. Marcus Reed couldn't stop thinking about her. Every story he uncovered raised even more questions. No criminal record. No social media. No friends who knew anything about her childhood. No birth certificate. Nothing. It was as if Amara Brooks had appeared out of nowhere. Marcus visited the church where she had supposedly been found. The elderly pastor welcomed him warmly. You aren't the first person asking about that young woman. Marcus frowned. Who else came? The pastor hesitated. A government official. Marcus's heartbeat quickened. What did he want? He asked about the day the baby arrived. Marcus immediately realized this wasn't an ordinary investigation anymore. Someone very powerful was protecting Amara. Or searching for her. Meanwhile, inside a secure conference room at the White House, the First Lady, Naomi Carter, listened as Elijah revealed the truth. She covered her mouth in disbelief. You mean? Our daughter is alive? Elijah nodded slowly. Naomi burst into tears. For years, she had blamed herself for the tragedy that tore their family apart. I thought I'd lost her forever. Elijah gently held her hand. So did I. Naomi looked into his eyes. When can I meet her? He smiled sadly. Soon. But first, I need to know if she'll accept us. That afternoon, Amara received an unexpected assignment. The community center was hosting a charity banquet for military veterans. Volunteers rushed around preparing tables and decorations. Amara quietly worked in the background. As guests arrived, she noticed one elderly veteran sitting alone in a wheelchair. No one seemed to recognize him. She carried a warm meal to his table. Would you like some company? The old man smiled. I'd like that very much. For nearly an hour they talked. He shared stories about courage, sacrifice, and never giving up hope. Before leaving, he removed a small bronze coin from his pocket. I've carried this since the war. I want you to have it. Amara immediately shook her head. Oh no. It's too valuable. He smiled. The greatest people I've ever met never believed they deserved honor. You remind me of them. She accepted the coin with tears in her eyes. Neither of them noticed the photographers capturing the touching moment. Later that evening, Marcus Reed finally found Grace Brooks waiting outside the family home. He politely introduced himself. I have a few questions about Amara. Grace looked nervous. I don't think I should. Marcus lowered his voice. I believe someone is hiding the truth about her. Grace froze. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she whispered. I've lived with guilt for 24 years. Marcus listened carefully. I never believed she was abandoned. I always believed someone was forced to leave her. Before she could say another word, Nathan stepped outside. What are you doing talking to strangers? He shoved Marcus backward. Get off my property. Marcus raised his hands peacefully. I'm leaving. As he walked away, Grace secretly slipped something into his jacket pocket. Marcus didn't notice until he reached his car. Inside the pocket was an old silver bracelet. Attached to it was a tiny charm shaped like a golden crown. Marcus stared in shock. This symbol again. That same night, President Elijah Carter disguised himself in simple clothes. A baseball cap. A plain jacket. No presidential motorcade. Only one unmarked SUV followed at a distance. For the first time in decades, he wasn't traveling as the leader of a nation. He was traveling as a father. Daniel Hayes spoke through an earpiece. She's finishing work now. Elijah watched from across the street as Amara stepped outside carrying her worn backpack. She looked exhausted. Yet when she noticed a homeless woman shivering on a bench, she removed her own jacket and gently wrapped it around the stranger's shoulders. The homeless woman looked up in disbelief. But you'll be cold. Amara smiled. I'll be okay. President Carter could no longer hold back his tears. He whispered. She's exactly like her mother. He wanted to run across the street, to hug her, to tell her everything, but he couldn't. Not yet. As Amara walked away into the night, she suddenly stopped. She slowly turned around. For a brief moment, her eyes met Elijah's from across the street. Neither of them spoke. Neither knew why the moment felt so familiar. Amara offered him a gentle smile. Then she continued walking. Elijah watched until she disappeared around the corner. His heart whispered the truth before his mind could. My daughter. Just then, Daniel Hayes received an urgent encrypted message on his phone. His expression changed instantly. He looked toward the president. Mr. President. We have a serious problem. Elijah turned. What happened? Daniel took a slow breath. Someone else has discovered who Amara really is. The color drained from Elijah's face. Who? Daniel looked at the screen one last time. Then answered quietly. They're coming for her, tonight. Night had settled over Washington. The city lights shimmered across the wet streets as Amara walked home with her empty backpack hanging from one shoulder. She had no idea that, only a few blocks away, several black SUVs had quietly surrounded the neighborhood. Inside one of them, Director Daniel Hayes read the intelligence report again. The anonymous buyer has offered $5 million for every document connected to Amara Brooks. Someone wants her identity buried forever. President Elijah Carter looked out the window. Whatever happens tonight, she must not be harmed. Daniel nodded. She won't be. At the same time, Marcus Reed sped through the streets toward Amara's neighborhood. The silver bracelet with the tiny golden crown rested on the passenger seat beside him. His phone rang. It was the elderly pastor. Marcus, someone broke into the church archives. What? They stole every record connected to the little girl who was left on our steps. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. They're trying to erase her history. Amara reached home just after 9. Nathan was waiting on the porch. His face was filled with anger. Where have you been? Working. Liar. He threw a newspaper onto the ground. The front page showed a photo of Amara saving the little boy at the bus station. The headline read, "The Angel of Washington captures America's heart." Nathan's face twisted with jealousy. You've embarrassed this family. Vanessa stepped outside, glaring at Amara. Everyone's talking about you. Nathan pointed toward the street. If you want attention so badly, you can sleep outside tonight. Before Amara could answer, he slammed the front door. The lock clicked. She stood silently on the porch, holding back tears. She didn't knock. She simply sat on the steps, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. From across the street, President Carter watched everything. Every cruel word. Every tear. Every moment. His heart shattered. He stepped out of the SUV. Daniel quickly grabbed his arm. Mr. President, please. I can't watch this anymore. If you reveal yourself now, everything could become dangerous. Elijah looked at Amara sitting alone in the darkness. I've missed 24 years of protecting her. I'm not losing another minute. Ignoring the warnings, he slowly crossed the street. Amara looked up as she heard footsteps. An older African-American man wearing a simple jacket stopped a few feet away. His eyes were kind. Mind if I sit here? She gave a small smile. Of course. He sat beside her on the porch. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, he asked, "Hard day?" Amara laughed softly. You could say that. What keeps you smiling? She looked toward the stars. My grandmother used to tell me that bitterness is a prison. If I let cruel people steal my kindness, they win. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. Those words sounded exactly like something Naomi used to say. He swallowed hard. Do you ever wish your life had been different? Amara smiled sadly. Every day. But wishing doesn't change yesterday. So I try to make tomorrow better. The president struggled to hold back his emotions. Without thinking, he removed his own scarf and gently placed it around her shoulders. You'll catch a cold. Amara looked surprised. Thank you. No one's ever done that for me. Elijah smiled through tears. You deserve much more than a scarf. Before he could say another word, Daniel hurried across the street. Sir. He stopped himself before saying, Mr. President, we need to go. Elijah stood reluctantly. Before leaving, he looked into Amara's eyes. I hope we meet again. She smiled warmly. I hope so too. As he walked away, Amara felt something she couldn't explain. For the first time in her life, being near a complete stranger had made her feel safe. The next morning, Marcus Reed arrived at the White House after receiving an anonymous invitation. He was escorted into a secure conference room. When the doors opened, he froze. Standing before him was President Elijah Carter. Marcus immediately understood. You know who she is. Elijah nodded slowly. I do. Marcus carefully placed the silver bracelet with the golden crown on the table. I think this belongs to your family. The president stared at it in silence. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Naomi had given that bracelet to their infant daughter the day she was born. I thought this was gone forever. Marcus leaned forward. Who is Amara? Elijah looked directly into his eyes. My daughter. The room fell silent. Marcus struggled to process what he had just heard. The entire country believes your daughter died. So did I. Meanwhile, Amara reported for work as usual. She expected another ordinary day. Instead, the community center director greeted her with a huge smile. Amara, there's someone here to see you. She looked toward the entrance. An elegant elderly woman stood there holding a bouquet of white lilies. I've been searching for you. Amara blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, have we met? The woman smiled through tears. No. But I knew your mother. Amara's heart skipped a beat. My mother? The woman nodded. She loved white lilies. Every spring she filled her garden with them. Amara stared at the flowers. A strange memory flashed through her mind. A gentle voice. Soft laughter. The sweet scent of lilies floating through the air. Then, the memory vanished. She held her head. I don't understand. Before the woman could explain further, 2 masked men burst through the entrance. One shouted, There she is. Guests screamed. Tables overturned. The bouquet fell to the floor. Amara instinctively stepped in front of a frightened little girl. The masked men rushed toward her. Outside, Secret Service agents reacted instantly. Daniel Hayes reached for his radio. Protect Amara. President Carter, who had just arrived nearby, heard the call. His face turned pale. He started running toward the building. Inside, Amara backed away as one of the attackers grabbed her arm. The little girl cried in fear. Without thinking about herself, Amara pushed the child behind her and faced the danger alone. Just as the attacker raised his weapon, a powerful voice thundered from the entrance. Let her go. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway, surrounded by Secret Service agents, was the President of the United States. His eyes were locked on Amara, filled not with authority, but with the desperate fear of a father trying to save his daughter. The entire community center fell silent. Even the masked men froze. Standing in the doorway was the President of the United States, surrounded by Secret Service agents with weapons drawn. His commanding voice echoed through the building. Let her go. Now. The attacker tightened his grip on Amara's arm. You shouldn't have come here. Before he could finish, Secret Service agents rushed forward. Within seconds, the two masked men were disarmed and pinned to the floor. Terrified families hurried outside while agents secured every entrance. Amara stood motionless, trying to understand why the president himself had come to save an ordinary janitor. President Elijah Carter slowly walked toward her. For a brief moment, the world around them disappeared. Are you hurt? He asked gently. Amara shook her head. I'm okay. She looked at him with confusion. Mr. President, why are you here? Elijah smiled softly. Because someone very important was in danger. Amara assumed he was talking about one of the children. She glanced around. The little girl is safe, Elijah whispered. So are you. The attackers were escorted into armored vehicles. Director Daniel Hayes questioned the leader immediately. Who hired you? The man laughed. You'll never stop them. The truth must stay buried. Hayes narrowed his eyes. What truth? The man refused to answer. Instead, he smiled. You already know. Inside the community center, paramedics examined Amara. She insisted she was fine. As she stood to leave, President Carter spoke again. Would you have dinner with me? Amara stared in disbelief. With you? He nodded. As a thank you. She looked embarrassed. I don't think someone like me belongs at the White House. Elijah's heart broke. Someone like you belongs wherever kindness is needed. After a long pause, she smiled. I'd be honored. That evening, for the first time in her life, Amara entered the White House. She walked slowly through its grand halls, amazed by the portraits, chandeliers, and history surrounding her. I've only seen this place on television. Elijah chuckled. It feels different when you're inside. She smiled. It feels impossible. The First Lady, Naomi Carter, waited quietly in a private dining room. The moment she saw Amara, tears filled her eyes. She wanted nothing more than to embrace her daughter. But she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she greeted her warmly. It's wonderful to meet you. Amara smiled politely. Thank you for inviting me. Throughout dinner, they laughed together. They shared stories. Amara spoke about helping strangers. Naomi listened with overwhelming pride. Elijah barely touched his food. He spent most of the evening simply watching his daughter smile. It was a smile he had dreamed of seeing for 24 long years. After dinner, Elijah asked Amara if she would join him in the White House garden. The moonlight illuminated rows of beautiful white lilies. Amara stopped walking. They're beautiful. Elijah watched her carefully. Do they remind you of anything? She closed her eyes. For a moment. A faint memory returned. A woman singing softly. Gentle hands holding her. The sweet fragrance of lilies. Then the memory disappeared again. I don't know why. They make me feel safe. Elijah fought back tears. So do they for me. Meanwhile, Marcus Reed continued investigating the case. Using old court records, he uncovered a sealed file from 24 years earlier. Inside was the name of a former hospital administrator, Richard Holloway. The file claimed that, on the very night Amara disappeared as a baby, security cameras inside the hospital mysteriously stopped working. One employee had tried to report suspicious activity. The next day, he vanished. Marcus immediately called Director Hayes. I know who helped cover this up. Hayes replied. Bring everything to the White House. Late that night, Grace Brooks quietly packed a small suitcase. Nathan watched from the doorway. Where do you think you're going? Grace looked at him with tears in her eyes. For 24 years I've stayed silent. No more. Nathan stepped closer. If you tell anyone what happened, Grace interrupted him. I should have protected her. I was too afraid. But I won't be afraid anymore. Nathan's face turned pale. You don't know what you're doing. Grace looked directly into his eyes. Oh, I finally do. She walked out of the house without looking back. The next morning, the White House prepared for an emergency national press conference. Journalists from around the world filled the briefing room. No one knew why the president had called such an unexpected event. Inside a private office, Elijah stood beside Naomi. Amara entered, wearing a simple navy blue dress provided by the White House staff. She looked nervous. I still don't understand why I'm here. Elijah smiled gently. Because today, the truth deserves to be heard. Before Amara could ask another question, Grace Brooks arrived under Secret Service protection. The moment she saw Amara, she burst into tears. I'm so sorry. Amara hugged her. You have nothing to apologize for. Grace shook her head. Yes. I do. She reached into her suitcase and removed a faded envelope. I've hidden this for 24 years. Inside was a handwritten letter. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the top were the words. To whoever finds my daughter. Elijah's hands began to shake. Naomi covered her mouth. Amara stared at the letter, completely unaware that the words inside were about to change her life forever. Outside, the press secretary announced. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Hundreds of cameras turned toward the stage. Elijah took one deep breath, then stepped forward. The entire nation watched live. He looked at the audience. Then back at Amara. His eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth to speak. The room was completely silent. Hundreds of journalists stared toward the podium. Millions of Americans watched the live broadcast from their homes, offices, schools, restaurants, and airports. President Elijah Carter stood behind the microphone. His hands trembled. Not because he feared the cameras, but because, after 24 years, he was finally about to tell his daughter the truth. He looked at Amara. She smiled politely, still believing she had simply been invited as a guest. She had no idea that the next few moments would change her life forever. Elijah took a deep breath. My fellow Americans. Today is not a day about politics. It is not about elections. It is not about power. He paused, his voice shaking. It is about a promise. A promise a father made to his little girl. The room grew even quieter. 24 years ago, my wife and I welcomed a beautiful baby daughter into this world. 12 days later, our daughter disappeared. A wave of whispers spread across the audience. For more than 2 decades. We searched. We prayed. We never gave up. Tears filled Naomi Carter's eyes as she stood beside the stage. Elijah slowly turned toward Amara. And today, our search is finally over. Amara frowned in confusion. She looked around the room. Who was he talking about? The president walked away from the podium. One step, then another, until he stood directly in front of her. His eyes overflowed with tears. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, Amara, you are my daughter. The words echoed across the nation. Amara froze. She stared at him in complete disbelief. No. Her legs became weak. I don't understand. Naomi rushed forward, crying openly. She gently placed the faded baby blanket with the tiny golden crown into Amara's hands. Then Elijah held up the DNA report. It has been confirmed. There is no doubt. You are our daughter. The room erupted. Some reporters cried. Others stood in stunned silence. Millions watching at home wiped tears from their faces. Amara looked down at the blanket. Then at the silver bracelet with the tiny golden crown. Then at the faded photograph of a young Elijah holding a newborn wrapped in the same blanket. Every piece fit together. Her hands began to shake. You've been searching for me. Elijah nodded. Every single day. Amara burst into tears. Why didn't you find me sooner? Elijah's voice broke. I failed you. I should have protected you. I should have brought you home. I'm so sorry. Amara stepped forward. Without another word, she wrapped her arms around him. For the first time in 24 years, a father held his daughter again. The audience rose to its feet. The room filled with applause. Naomi embraced them both, and the three held each other tightly, tears flowing freely. It was the reunion they had all dreamed of. After the emotional embrace, Grace Brooks stepped forward. She faced the cameras. I have something to confess. The room became quiet once again. 24 years ago, I found Amara outside a church. I also saw the man who left her there. He wasn't abandoning her. He was crying. He kissed her forehead before driving away. I was afraid to speak because powerful people warned me to stay silent. Nathan Brooks had accepted money to keep the truth hidden and forced Grace to remain quiet. Grace lowered her head. "I should have told the truth years ago. I'm sorry." Amara walked to her and gently took her hands. "You gave me a home when I had no one. You made mistakes. But you also loved me. I forgive you." Grace broke down in tears. Moments later, Director Daniel Hayes announced that the investigation had uncovered the entire conspiracy. Richard Holloway and several former officials had orchestrated the kidnapping decades earlier as part of a political plot against Elijah Carter before his rise to national leadership. Those responsible were arrested and charged. Justice, delayed for many years, had finally arrived. Weeks later, Amara moved into the White House, not because she wanted luxury, but because she wanted to know the family she had lost. She spent long afternoons talking with Naomi, looking through old family photo albums. She laughed with her father over stories from his younger days. She planted white lilies in the White House garden, just as her mother once had. But despite her new life, one thing never changed. Every Saturday morning, Amara returned to the same community center where she had once worked as a janitor. She cleaned floors, served meals, read books to children, and quietly helped anyone in need. One volunteer asked, "You don't have to do this anymore." Amara smiled. "I never did. I do it because kindness gave me hope before I knew who I was." Several months later, President Carter invited Amara to stand beside him during the opening of a new national initiative. It was called the Worth Beyond Words Foundation. The organization provided housing, education, counseling, and scholarships for abandoned children across America. During the ceremony, Amara stepped to the microphone. She looked across the crowd. "I grew up believing I was worthless. People judged me by my clothes, my job, and my past. But your value is never decided by those who refuse to see your heart. Never let someone else's cruelty become your identity. Kindness is stronger than hatred. Forgiveness is stronger than revenge. And hope can survive even the darkest nights." The crowd stood and applauded. Many were in tears. As the sun set behind the White House, Amara stood in the blooming garden of white lilies. President Elijah Carter joined her. They looked toward the sky in peaceful silence. He smiled. "I lost a daughter. And God gave me the chance to find a remarkable woman." Amara slipped her hand into his. "I spent my whole life searching for a family. I never realized. My family was searching for me too." Father and daughter embraced once more as the golden sunset bathed the White House in warm light. Their story became a symbol of hope across the nation, a reminder that love never stops searching, forgiveness can heal the deepest wounds, and no person is ever truly worthless.